Okay, today we're going to build one of the large mech legs, representative of something you'd see on my Instagram feed or Flickr feed. One of these guys here. And I will show a couple different ways of strengthening the foot, and I'll show a couple different methods from the hip techniques as far as how to attach it to your actual mech. Starting with the foot, 2 bricks of the receptacles, very basic. I generally use 1 brick of spacing between them, but you can really use whatever works for you. And then we'll move on to the actual leg. Next step complete. And of course I've actually done this backwards. This is typically what your leg will look like. It's going to have the tarsometatarsus, shin, and thigh. So here we have my main technique for adding strength to the foot. We have a ball axle with stop, this perpendicular joint here, and that is held in place with these 2 bushings and these 2 Technic bricks, and that really offers a lot of strength and lots of range of motion. You can go all the way back, and you can go really as far forward as determined by the length of axle you've used there. Eventually it'll pop out if you go too far. And of course it has side-to-side movement because both of those ball joints are on the same plane. So the second technique I use uses maybe slightly more common parts. It has these 2 plates with pinholes, and again a ball with an axle. It's important to use axles with stops so that you can put the stop on the other side of the ball and it prevents the axle from being pulled out. But instead of the perpendicular tube, it uses just a standard little Technic connector here. So it works similarly. You get slightly less backwards range, just where I've positioned it here. Theoretically, I could, take this and move these plates higher up. So let's do that now. So again, depending on where you put it, you have different amounts of range. And again, depending on how much forward motion you want, you may need a longer axle. But the solution's great in that it uses less space than this brick does, but it's a little bit more limited. I prefer the other technique. Now we'll move on to the hips. So now we're going to do the hip attachments. In this case, we're going to build it for the simple but strong design I showed in my last video, which will give you leg abduction but not lateral rotation. One side done there, you can see I'm basically binding the rotation discs together and creating plates that I can then do some stud forward design on. And that's basically it. At this point, you would want to reinforce these corner plates with some 1x4 plates and use whatever kind of studs with bricks you'd like to style it. And this will be able to snap right in. With a little tweaking like that. Squash it down so it fits on camera. Lots of articulation. This is what I really like about rotation discs is you get greater, or I should say less than 90-degree rotation, whereas on most joints you're really stuck at 90 degrees, but you can really, if you plate this carefully, get really nice articulation all the way down. So moving on to the single joint style, you see that I removed that extra set of rotation discs up here, but we do still need something to bind this kind of framing onto. So rather than using rotation discs at the top, we just use these 1x3 lift arms. So I'll just start popping those onto the top here. And then, similar to what we did with the rotation disc, we're really just going to put it all together. And that's fairly secure in there. Again, you're going to want something to go across the full length of these corner plates to really lock it in place. And from there, you can really decide to mount your hip joint wherever you want, depending on how tall a thigh you want. So you'd have something like this, and you're going to want to obviously wrap this brick with something else to hold it in place. But that is effectively how you get the exact same ability to build studs forward for your plating up there while maintaining the simpler joint. And that is what a large mech leg looks like.